Here's the reason you may be amazing at feeling other people's emotions, but deeply struggle with feeling your own. Welcome back. And firstly, if you're new here and you want to learn about emotional health, how to deal with your feelings, being a highly sensitive person and still thriving in the world today, then please make sure you've subscribed and turned on the notifications so you know each and every time I post a video. So I put a post out recently on Instagram that said, if as children we felt a sense that our parents were struggling emotionally, we may have felt that in order for attachment, we needed to always be okay. We became experts at feeling others' emotions while completely detaching from our own. And I got a lot of messages for people asking for me to elaborate on it, that they'd never heard something being said like that. I think the reason that this came to me in the way that I did is because I'm rereading a book by Alice Miller called The Drama of the Gifted Child. If you haven't read that, then you should absolutely read that book. I read it periodically, at least once a year, have done for the last few years. And each and every time that I read it, it sort of goes in even more because she packs no punches in it, right? So she doesn't fluff anything up, and it's quite a short book, but it's just like, boom, this is the way that it is. And, you know, I believe myself to be a truth seeker. And I remember the first time I read it, it just blew to bits some of the things that I believed and some of the things that I was using as coping mechanisms. It just blew it to bits. So I'm going to elaborate on exactly what I mean by finding the ability to be able to push down our emotions and to be able to feel everybody else's. Now, simply speaking, if for whatever reason when we were younger and we were seeking attachment from our parents, if we sensed that our parents were emotionally full, then we may have felt like any kind of extreme emotion from our end or difficult emotion would be a burden to our parents. Now, more than that authenticity of being in touch with our feelings, what we need more is attachment from our parents, or what we crave more is attachment from our parents when we are of that age. And so if we sense that, then we would have pushed down and buried all of our difficult emotions. We would have found our brains, when developing at the fastest rate, would have found ways to push down and bury all of our difficult emotions in order to be able to present in a way that we would get attachment from our parents. On top of that, and particularly if you're a sensitive person like I always was and am, I became an expert at reading what people needed me to be in order to be that. So I became an expert at feeling deeply your emotions, taking on how you're feeling, so that I could be what you needed me to be in order to get my attachment that I was seeking from you. So the methodology that I would have learned as a small child with my parents is the conditioning that I then took on into my adult life. And if you're wondering if maybe this is kind of what you're like, there's some simple ways of picking up and finding out or highlighting how you might be one of these people. If throughout your life, whenever you experienced difficult emotions, so when you felt like you were supposed to be sad, you probably had to try and act it out. So you would like think of sad films and think of how you would look and be when you were sad, and then you would attempt to be that because you couldn't actually feel the emotion truly, but you knew logically that you should be able to feel it. So you'd have to push yourself to feel it. And then another way is, if you've ever lost anybody close in your family and you felt the sadness of everybody else and you felt the difficult emotions of everybody else, but when it came to how you felt, you just felt numb. And then another way on top of that is when you remember things that happened to you, particularly difficult things that happened to you when you were younger. If you remember them almost happening to a character that happens to be the younger version of you, then that's a really, really good sign that at the time of it happening, you had to detach. What results from this is what I believe, this is why we see things like depression, right? So much of depression, certainly my depression, was the fact that I'd buried down and pushed all these emotions. I'd learned how to detach from them for so long. My body started to try and find a way to release these emotions, because if I don't find a way to feel and process my emotions, then my body will do that for me. Okay. One of the most important things to understand is that what we're talking about here, is happening in those initial few years. And I'm talking more so the initial 4 or 5 years, when the brain is really developing fast, right? And it's developing based on its environment. So our responses and stuff are developed in that moment, right? And if our parents we're under some kind of stress, and whatever that may be. Now, you don't need like an alcoholic parent or some really traumatic parents, right? You just need parents that for whatever reason were stressed. As children, we are highly intuitive, so we pick up on that stress and we adapt and become what we need to be, right? What that actually means is that at that age of our lives, not because we had bad parents, right, but because of the situation, what that meant is that we didn't feel like we were loved unconditionally. Lots of us were, right? But we didn't feel we were loved unconditionally. We felt that the love was conditional, that we had to be something in order to be it, right? And again, what you'll find is lots of people on healing journeys believing that they're not lovable as they are and that they need to change in order to become lovable, right? When actually we need to find ways to love ourselves in all of our glory. Because children at that age absolutely do need unconditional love. And that's why you see some adults will chase an unhealthy unconditional love. As adults, from other adults, we shouldn't get unconditional love. It shouldn't be completely unconditional, right? Because then we would just be loved by people no matter what, right? And actually, when you push into that and truth seek from that's not healthy. But when we're children, we need to be loved completely unconditionally. And I'm talking about when we're like up to, proper children. We should be loved unconditionally when we're angry, when we're in fits of rage, when we're crying, when we're happy, when we're sad, all of those things, right? But sometimes we live in environments where we don't get that unconditional love, not because we have bad parents, but because we live in an environment that won't allow that. So that's my elaboration. I hope that helps. I'm conscious of the time. I wanted to try and keep this one quite short because I wanted to just really kind of push through and just give the simple definition. So I'd love to hear if this helped. If it has, as ever, please make sure you like the video, and I'll see you next week.